Hello and welcome to Study Political, the channel I have made specifically for the Rajiv Gandhi University and its affiliate colleges, and I will be uploading videos on political science, both UG and PG, according to the latest syllabus of Rajiv Gandhi University. So today in this video we will learn about the foreign policy of Russia, the historical background or the foundation of Russian foreign policy. The first is the historical foundation, that is historical perspective of the foreign policy of Russia, and the second period is the period of transition. So when we learn the foreign policy of Russia, we categorize it in two part. The first is the historical foundation, that is the time when Soviet Union actually came into existence, and after the second part is the period of transition when this erstwhile Soviet Union got disintegrated and Russia became the legal heir of the Soviet Union. So after the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik took over the Russian Empire in 1918. The Tsarist Russia was reorganized as the Soviet Union in 1922. So at the first, it was treated as an unrecognized parian state because of its repudiating the Tsarist depth and threats to destroy capitalism at home and at abroad. But by 1922, Moscow had repudiated the goal of world revolution and sought diplomatic recognition and friendly trade relation with the world. Starting with Britain and Germany. Britain and Germany were the first country to establish diplomatic relation with the Soviet Union. So under the dictator Joseph Stalin, the most powerful leader of the erstwhile Soviet Union, the country was transformed in the 1930s into a industrial and military power. Russia also took part in the Second World War. So after 1945, the Russia became one of the five permanent member of the United Nations Security Council when it was established in the year 1945, along with USA, Britain, France, and China. The permanent membership in the United Nations gave it the right to veto any of the Security Council's resolution. So what happened next? The next event in the Cold War. By 1947, America and European anger at Soviet control over Eastern Europe led to a Cold War between the United States and the USSR. Rest is the history. So now we will discuss the founding principles of the foreign policy of Russia. So the basic principle were according to the Soviet Marxist-Leninist theories, the basic character of Soviet foreign policy was set forth by V.I. Lenin in his decree on peace, which was adopted by the Second Congress of the Soviet in November 1917. It set forth the dual nature of Soviet foreign policy, that is, proletarian internationalism and peaceful coexistence. So, what is proletarian internationalism? Proletarian internationalism refers to the common cause of the working class of all countries in struggling to overthrow the bourgeoisie and to start a communist revolution. And secondly, the peaceful coexistence refers to measures ensure a relatively peaceful government to government relations with capitalist state. So apart from this, other principles of the Soviet Union's foreign policy were ideology of communism, that is promotion of communist ideology in the world. Cold War factor, obviously Cold War factor was a very important principle of Soviet Union's foreign policy, as the world was got divided on the basis of ideology. The one was led by the USA, the second was led by the USSR. Warsaw Pact, that is alliance formation. Warsaw Pact is kind of a Soviet a model of NATO to counteract the American power and its entrance. Sixthly, to contain and restrict the influence of power of the USA and its alliances. And 70 to build a special relationship with traditional partners, that is the newly emerging third world countries. They wanted to establish a good and a special relation with them. And anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism, that become one of the important principle of Soviet Union's foreign policy. They they considered colonialism and imperialism uh, as one of the basic character of capitalism, and hence they were against both the system. They also started providing help to the national struggle carried out by col- uh, colonial many struggles going on in the colonial states. So apart from this, what were the basic goals and objective of Russia's foreign policy? So the general foreign policy goals and objective of Russian foreign policy were ensuring favorable external conditions conducive to building communism. So now Soviet Union wanted to ensure that its internal foreign policy is not being threatened, or is not being interfered by any of the countries. So for this matter, it always ensure that it maintain a favorable external conditions, so that communism can be built in the Soviet Union and in its satellite state. So it also wanted to eliminate the trade of World War. Is it has already fought two world wars, and the trade and the consequences, the deadliest consequences World War brought was uh, there in their memory. So they wanted to eliminate the trade of World War. Hence, they never got engaged with any kind of hard war with its antagonistic bloc, that is the USSR-led capitalist bloc. Now, another important objective or goal of the Soviet Union's foreign policy was to strengthen world socialist system. As a socialist country founded on the very principle of Marxism and Leninism, it wanted to ensure that socialism thrived in the world. Now, it also wanted to develop friendly and equal relations with newly liberated third world countries, because the third world countries after their liberation wanted independent foreign policy, and hence they many of them adopted NAM, that is non-aligned movement, as their basic objective of foreign policy or basic principle of foreign policy. Hence it was in Russia's interest to develop equal and friendly relations with them, because NAM was led by some of the largest and powerful countries like India, ensuring solidarity with communist and revolutionary democratic parties, the international workers movement and national liberation struggle, etc. It was also one of the important goal of Russian foreign policy. And obviously disarmament, because Russia and USA both had attained nuclear weapons by 1950. So there was a trade of mutual destruction if nuclear war ever broke out between them. One of the event of this nuclear war that might have developed was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So both the countries agreed on the this disarmament. Hence, both USA and USSR has signed many disarmament agreements. So now after this, we can say we can say that although these general foreign policy goals were apparently conceived in forms of priorities, the emphasis and ranking of these priorities have changed over times in response to domestic and international stimulus. So now, what were the basic determinants of Russian foreign policy? So basic determinants of Russia's foreign policy were Geography, political tradition and philosophy, Cold War, Comic Con, leadership, military, technology, etc. We will discuss this one by one. So now we know the foreign policy of a country is the sum total of the principles, interests, and objectives which it seeks to promote through its relations with other countries. It is also for influencing and changing the behavior of other states and for adjusting its own activities to the international environment. So the conduct of and formulation of foreign policy is governed by interplay of numerous determinants, institutions, process, and personalities. Now, geographically, it was the largest territory, and it still is the largest territory. So, the geographical integrity and territorial integrity was one of the foremost objective of its foreign policy, and it, to a large extent, determined the foreign policy of Russia. Political tradition of Marxist-Leninism and philosophy of Marxism and socialism also greatly determined Russia's foreign policy. Obviously, Cold War factor was there, and Comecon it economic diplomacy, kind of a Soviet kind of a Marshall Plan, also determined Russia's foreign policy. Leadership of stalwart leaders like Joseph Stalin, Lenin, V.I. Lenin, Nikita Khrushchev. They had a strong impact on the foreign policy of Russia. Militarily, Russia was a capable and strong country, uh, and technologically, it had acquired atom bomb, nuclear power, and space technologies. So these all uh, basic determinants. These are all the determinants of Russia's foreign policy. Apart from this, national security was one of the most important determinant of Russia's foreign policy. The Bolshevik believed that the imperialists would attempt to overthrow the revolution in Russia, hence, national security was the foremost priority. So, being a socialist country, it felt more threatened by the leading capitalist powers. It was also because a revolution in Russia was surviving in isolation without the support of successive political revolutions in Central Europe. Hence, uh, these were the brief of Russia's foreign policy or the foundation or historical background of Russian foreign policy. In the next video, we will discuss the transition period, that is Russia's foreign policy in transition. I hope you got little clarification on the topic. If you want me to add anything, I can add them in the next one. Thank you so much.